You're watching Public Comment, a vlog by Sean O'Connor, which focuses on politics, culture, and self. Hey, y'all. I don't know why I chose to say y'all today, except there's something about the expression y'all that is just so different from what I usually say. You know, my greetings, ladies and gentlemen, or good day. So I am experimenting with and in search of a proper greeting, though perhaps there is opportunity for multiple kinds of greetings as I experiment with this new video vlogging career of mine, which I have so utterly fallen deeply and madly and wildly and passionately in love with. So I understand, it's been brought to my attention that I need to be careful and not speak so slowly because it's a strange tendency I have to stop and pause and perhaps over enunciate my language. It's been brought to my attention by you, the viewers. So I want to let you know a few things. Number one, if your feedback is constructive, I read, I listen, and I contemplate it. I really do. Even if it's hard to take, I think about what you have to say if it's a constructive thing. So here's evidence. I'm listening to you. I get it. I talk slow. Point number two, though. I don't know. I think just like I have a strange inability to be funny, I sometimes have a strange, what's the proper word? I have a strange disposition or predisposition to simply feel the words that I say and utter them in a particular way. It perhaps goes back to those days when I used to write poems. Or it could have to do even with some degree of whatever I might have thought I picked up when I took acting classes. Not positive. Also, you should know, yes, I'm reading from a script. I'm reading from a script about 90% of the time because I believe that if I actually spend time and think about what I want to say to you and jot it all down, it gives me time to present something to you that's actually more honest than if it's a purely extemporaneous thing, because it means I took the time to write out what I thought, and then I also was thinking about what I was thinking about as I wrote it down. So it just provides an opportunity for a little bit more thought. So I apologize if it annoys you as my eyes move up and down between the camera and my computer screen. You see, I've not yet found a way to acquire the appropriate teleprompter. And if this isn't centered properly, I also apologize. Obviously, I've got a lot of learning to do. I'm new at this, despite the fact that we're at 204, well, not we, I do this by myself. I am at 200 and how many videos now? 240 something. I know I had this open. I'm at 241 videos. This is video number 242 on the Public Comment YouTube channel. In fact, minus many videos that I deleted feeling embarrassed by that more, that they just utterly didn't represent me, or, you know, I had my reasons. Anyway, the question I wanted to raise to you today, to begin with, the overarching theme here is communicating to a universal audience, seeking out a universal audience, in contrast to the concept of a niche audience. And also we're going to be talking about philosophy, religion, and ideology here. And so we begin with this question. Do you identify with any particular religion. And by that I mean when push comes to shove, as they say, and yes, I know I love to say, as they say. And I love those little sayings that they say. Of course, who are they, right? Some mysterious crowd of people in our minds, I don't know, I suppose. Yes, I suppose. Or these assumptions we make that some large group of people or significant group of people utter this particular saying. Moving on. What I'm trying to say here is this. When faced with your sense of mortality or your contemplations on the subject of life in a general way, I'm talking here about that very wide-angled, panoramic view of our births, our childhoods, teenage years, young adulthood, the intense desire for sex, and whether or not you believe in the depth of romantic relationships, and whether or not you believe in monogamy, marriage, parenthood, sense of purpose, meaning, the meaning of the work you do and the money you make, spend, save, how much you do or do not care about how what you do impacts your health, what you make of your social life, whether you want friends, how you regard your friends, what you think those friendships are supposed to be, how you handle disagreements. When you think about what you care. When I apologize there, see, that's the whole conflict that arises when you write a script is, and especially in my case, you see I need glasses. So also one reason that I'm slow when I read is that the fonts are actually very big because my eyesight is very poor. And this means that each cluster of sentences only takes up like a big part of the page, and I've got to keep scrolling down, and if the computer freezes or this or that. But I also wanted to ask you about, we were talking about how you handle disagreements. When you think, I also wanted to ask, when do you think about what it is you say you care about, that you believe you care about, that you do indeed care about? I'm talking about what some of us might refer to as your values, your priorities, your interests. I'm talking about when you feel sad and you reflect. And I'm asking, do you, in that context, call yourself an atheist, a Muslim, a Buddhist, a Christian, a Sikh, a Scientologist, etc., just to name a few of these religions or ideological identities? Do you call yourself any of these things? I want to know. To what extent have you, to the greatest depths of your convictions, justified on the granular level those kinds of religious, ideological, philosophical beliefs that you have? I remember the very first ideological, philosophical, religious thought I ever had. Now, I don't remember the first time I'd actually learned of this concept of a so-called God, though I do remember I was roughly 3 years old. I could have been 2.5, I could have been 3.5, maybe 4, though I doubt it. And I had asked my grandmother if God was a boy or a girl. And my grandmother said, God is whatever you want God to be. That's actually one of the earliest memories I have. And it's also one of those memories I have where it's as close to verbatim as, well, it's exceptionally close to exactly what was said. Particularly with respect to my childhood, memories. Now, I don't know when it occurred to me that my father's side of the family was theoretically Christian and my mother's side of the family was, in theory, Jewish, though I do remember a dear friend of mine asked me what religion I identified with. I was not older than 13, though I don't know exactly what time frame this was. I know I was not older than 13. And when we had this conversation, and my response initially was to joke and say I was Catholic because there was Jewish and Catholic, right? To me, that made sense. But my friend said to really think about what it is I identified with on a religious level. So I did. And I contemplated things like Santa Claus came to my mind, you know, Christianity, Christmas, and how, in fact, there was no Santa Claus. But this was another example of something they tell you, some people, exists, that there's no empirical proof of, but we just say, oh, okay, it exists, until you learn that it doesn't. And I was thinking about science as a concept, a subject. I was thinking about empiricism. Now, I wouldn't have used that word in those days. I'm not sure I even knew of that word in those days. 5th grade, 6th grade, maybe it was used in class, but I was a poor student. If you've seen some of my other vlogs, you know I got an F in math in 5th grade, and certainly in the STEM subjects, I just was subpar, to put it euphemistically. Ironically, though, science reigned supreme in my consciousness in those days. Even if I didn't take an interest in science academically, I still accepted this assumption that that which was science was, for a lack of better terms, an empirical thing that could be verifiable, you know, fact, a tangible fact. So it did appear to me, whatever this God concept was, it was clearly beyond empirical reach, and it was absent any legitimate scientific proof as far as I could understand. So I was prepared to call myself an atheist. I thought, yes, this God idea is conveniently a comforting idea. I thought it's interesting that there should be someone who we claim has lived, who claimed to have been the Son of God. That's quite a powerful sense of self to have, especially with no proof. And to suggest that the world should just accept it, these heaven and hell concepts along with that. And they have the pretentiousness, I thought, additionally, to tell you that God is something you just have to be primed to feel and have faith in. And if you don't have faith in it and you can't just feel it intuitively, there's something wrong with you. That didn't make any sense to me. It didn't seem like a fair thing to say. So I became a full-fledged atheist. Meanwhile, my best friend at the time, with whom I had these discourses on questions of religion, this friend of mine referred to himself as a Seventh-day Adventist Christian. We had these very deepening ideological differences throughout adolescence. Yet, as opposed to creating some kind of shattering crack in our friendship, actually, these differences between us strengthen the depth of our friendship. I can't begin to tell you how many countless hours this best friend of mine and I spent debating from every angle we could dream up the question of why one should or should not believe a God exists. Moreover, how should people process and regard a text like the Bible, the Torah, the Quran? And what would these implications be? For example, this Seventh-day Adventist Christian perspective held from some conversations I had with people of this way of thinking, views that various aspects of sexuality were sins. No sex before marriage, no masturbating, no lust. These things troubled me rather severely. Quite like the notion of God troubled me. This idea that a person shouldn't masturbate or explore his or her sexuality, to me, was absurd. One of the most absurd notions someone could come up with. It's not as if there was any harm in the matter, so long as people were not abusive and safe, etc. There was also there's a list of music that many of these Christians weren't supposed to listen to. And there were ideas of women as subservient to men, according to some of these Christians. And there was this perplexing fixation on Republicans and favoring the rich over the poor, strangely, ironically, right? Other questions that were raised from the perspective of many who believe in God. This sense that, well, because it could be said that a God absolutely exists, truth clearly is an absolute thing. Absolutism as a philosophical idea, that became a topic of deep contemplation and interest and discussion. So this was all for me an introduction to philosophy and ethics before ever having it in a classroom. I didn't receive any kind of education on philosophy in middle school or high school. It was just life conversation that presented it to me in the beginning. And I do wonder if it was not for this brilliant individual, this deep intellectual philosophical thinker I was so fortunate and lucky to meet and have a friendship with, would I have ever developed an inclination to contemplate these kinds of things, to have these kinds of conversations, to develop thoughts on these questions? Would I have become a philosophical person? Would I have become what some people might refer to as intellectual? Beyond the scope of this question of atheism versus Christianity and that whole debate, I never thought even about concepts such as philosophy or intellectualism. As a teenager, I didn't know what the definition of philosophy was. Of course, it's quite an aside, but one might argue there are many philosophers today at the professor level, maybe writing books, who still today don't know what the definition of philosophy is. That would be a separate conversation, of course. And you might think this is actually quite ironic. However, in those days, and when I was a teenager, if someone had described themselves as an intellectual, I probably would have had a real snobbish thought about it. That I would have accessed some stereotype in my mind and determined that this person was overly dry as an individual, detached from the more visceral elements of life. Because you see, I, on the other hand, as opposed to being an intellectual or an academic, I was an artist. Ooh, I was an actor. I was a poet. I was a movie writer. I was going to be a movie star, all these things. these esoteric things, that was the realm of the esoteric was blockheaded, I thought at the time. Corny, unreal. So, quick digression here with the word esoteric, by the way. I have to say that I feel opposed to a real niche type approach to communication. So I just don't like the word esoteric, and I don't like the implications of the word esoteric. I really desire to the best of my ability, to approach communication in a universal way. I want to be as universal as possible in my perspective and the way that I speak. What do I mean by universal? I just mean that I don't view myself as talking to intellectuals exclusively, or artists, or academics, or YouTubers, or Facebook people, or millennials, my contemporaries, even posterity. For all we know, you might think I'm far-fetched here. For all we know, this video file could reach some alien life form, and that alien life form could decipher this video file. So my point is, I dismiss entirely this notion, and I think somewhat to blame is the whole postmodernism thing, where everybody has their own values to a point where you probably have little clusters that share similar values, regardless of what is universally true or verifiably true, what they want to be true or call true, because no one can have power over them and use the word universal. Which, by the way, this is something that I've actually clung to, an idea I've had for a very long time. It goes back to when I was a kid and a teenager, and I didn't believe in cliques and didn't want to belong to, confine myself to, or identify with the jocks or the nerd or the dork or the geek or the stoner or the goth or the punk or the emo band, geek, theater person, bad kid. None of those things did I relate with in any way. The only thing you could call me in those days was an atheist, and only in the objective and descriptive sense. So I think if you're wondering about one of the elements of the context behind probably some of the loneliness I've felt in life, it's that I don't necessarily do well with associating with group identity, not even on a level of ethnicity. I don't like to refer to myself as German or Jewish or Irish. I really don't even entirely think of myself as American. I think of myself as a human being, objectively speaking. I think of myself as a globalist, actually. So I want to leave it with this for today, because this is a complex topic and I could go on forever here. I like this line from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Anthony Kiedis used this line. Is my shirt messed up here? I apologize. He says, universally speaking, I win in the long run. And I agree. If we speak universally, in the long run, we're going to win. Anyway, this chain of thought is to be continued, because I think it's an interesting chain of thought, but it's complex. And anyway, who doesn't like a good to be continued thing, right? LOL, as I like to say. Keep it real. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Ciao.